This edition of the Let's Talk program is a repeat edition which was first aired on Tuesday, 17th September 2024.
Is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Talk That Get Results. I'm Webbo Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line, address it to our Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis. So give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and 01700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and when we're getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, to respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards. But we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. You can also follow our live video stream of this program on our Facebook page and Vaughan Radio, on our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio. Click subscribe. Thank you all for joining us. Your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. Tonight, the Honorable Spencer Brand. Good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and a very pleasant good evening to my fellow panelists, Glendale Herbert. Good evening to all those who are listening to this edition of Let's Talk here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and certainly further afield. I want to say to all those who are celebrating tonight, whether it's a birthday or wedding anniversary or some accomplishment in their life, I certainly want to wish them a wonderful, wonderful evening. Driving over here, I noticed that the moon is out in all its glory, so I hope that they are celebrating under the moon. Webbo, I want to take this opportunity to offer condolences to quite a number of families who are in mourning. My friend there in Hamilton, Hyacinth and Lafayette Forbes, and the loss of their son. of course, the Herbert family there in Ramsbury on the loss of Elder Herbert. And we would have laid to rest Naya's mom last week. I know my good friend Wingo of Powell is also would have laid his dad to rest today there in the Fountain area. And I think, Webbo, that as the good book say, in the midst of life there is death, and I hope that these families who are in mourning, and all others, I hope that all of those who are in mourning tonight, that they can find some comfort in the memories of their loved one, their colleague, their friend, and hope that they would remember them in such a way that they can have fond memories of them. Webbo, today I would have attended the Charlestown Primary School Independence program, and I am very much heartened to see the talent and the skill of our young people. They are very talented. They dance, they sang, they dramatize, and I sat there and I said, I remember when I was that age and that size, doing some of those same kind of activity. So I want to wish all of those children all the very best as they celebrate our 41st independence. Webbo, thanks for the invitation, and I am indeed looking forward to tonight's discussion.
Glendale Herbert, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo. Good evening, Spencer, my friend. Good evening to everybody who's listening to Vaughan Radio. Tonight we're in independence mode in this 41st anniversary of independence. Webbo, it seems to me we've had Heroes Day. We've had all the celebration leading up to Heroes Day, and now we're going into our independence celebration, which I think is Thursday, on the 19th. But one of the things that struck me as we went into Heroes Weekend and Heroes Day, I look at our heroes, Webbo, and when I look at our heroes and I look at the landscape and I look at our people, I ask myself, how many of our people really know what our heroes did? What did they do to get that acclaim, or to be at least lift up at that level, to be a hero, a national hero? And I think it seems to me from where I'm sitting, it seems to me that they say heroes there, but if you ask a child or even an adult what did this hero do, whether it's Southwell or Bratcher, they can point to what is it that distinguishes them, that person, that in particular hero, to hero status. And I think there is that's a blind spot. Really you have to go from the administrators who runs the society, who is in charge of government, whether the federal government, and of course the extension of the NIA, to not let people aware and the children aware of their heroes. I think if you look at, for example, you go to other countries that has heroes, people tend to know what the hero's history was and how they got elevated, and what they get an understanding of the country's history and the struggle. So I think that's a missing something that I saw is glaringly missing in the dialogue and in the conversation as it relates to hero. We did us celebrate, it seems to me. Well, another thing that's on my mind tonight, I grew up here in Nevis, Charlestown, and I grew up on Main Street in Charlestown. And when I look on Charlestown, for one, it's alarming to me what's happening on Main Street. When you walk Main Street in the evening after 6 or 7 p.m., you see the strung along and the main thoroughfare of the country. You see a lot of prostitution. You see the people. When I say prostitution, people who dressed in a lewd fashion, women dressed half naked or almost naked, walking the streets. You can't even take your kids and go for a moonlight walk and say, I'll stroll down the pier anymore. That's your main thoroughfare. I think that countries do have red light district, and those sort of things ought to be put on a side street somewhere. That's what I know, how things are done, not on your main thoroughfare. If this is the story of our country and that's where we are at this point, social decadence is beginning to creep in. If my parents were to come back, and many of our parents were to come back and see the needs that we have in Main Street, even as close as where, as a national hero is right there. You see it right there in the corner. I think we are asleep or we're just drifting or floating. To me, it's alarming. I think an appeal needs to be made. We need to decide what we want from our country and what direction we want this country in. Thank you, Webbo.
We got an important topic that you touched on in the 41st anniversary of independence. And Brand, I don't know, probably will come in a little later, but I don't know if you want to expand on that, because we've been at 41 times around. One of the angles I can look at is if almost the 41st year, or to be safe, maybe at least 30 years. One of the things for sure we know we want done is reform the Constitution, but we don't know actually how. Because I hardly hear any details when people say we need to reform the Constitution. I don't know if I heard people go beyond that, or many people go beyond that with any details of what they want to change. And the second aspect that I think is of extreme significance is, what does it mean for those of us who are here at Independence 1, and how different are we as a people? And I heard Glendale referring to heroes. I don't have no problem with that. But what about those of us who are not heroes? No focus or enough, or I'm asking the question, is enough focus put on the rest of us? So those are my little takeaways from that topic that you mentioned, Glendale. And Bran, I don't know if you want to get into it.
Yes, St. Kitts and Nevis is celebrating our 41st anniversary of independence. I believe over those 41 years, St. Kitts and Nevis has certainly come a mighty long way. Is everything within the confines of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis perfect? Absolutely not. Far from it. Webbo, I could recall as a teenager, 13-year-old youngster, playing in the Nevis Symphonic Band on that parade. The excitement and the hope and the dreams and the aspiration of our people. The independence transition meant that our people were charged with the responsibility of managing and administering their own affairs. It meant that as the smallest nation in the world, then on the 19th of September 1983, our flags were placed next to the mightiest of nations at the UN, the United States of America, Great Britain, and those kind of countries. It meant, Webbo, that as a small nation in 1983, we had a single vote at the UN, just as many other countries throughout the length and breadth of the globe. So we were able, Webbo, to, as it were, start the process of administering our own affairs. We would have seen tremendous improvement in our infrastructure, roads, water. We have seen a significant improvement in our education system, in our healthcare system. We have seen, Webbo, that the economy, so to speak, of St. Kitts and Nevis have transitioned from sugar to a greater emphasis on things like tourism, financial services, the light manufacturing, and those kind of things. So we have seen some transition from 1983 to 2024. We have seen, Webbo, that for the very first time in our history as an independent country, we have not only a Governor General that is a female and also a Deputy Governor General that is a female. So we have really come a mighty long way, Webbo. We still do have some ways to go. I believe Glendale would have touched on some of the social and fabric of our society that we need to pay some attention to, and that we can twin that as well with some of the criminal activity that we are seeing in our community. I said earlier, is it perfect? Far from it. We still have some ways to go. Webbo, you touched on the issue of the reforming of our constitution. Our constitution is now 41 years old. I believe that as a young nation still, there are, I believe, certain things in the constitution that I think that can be looked at. I believe, Webbo, that it often baffles me, Webbo, that at times when political parties are in opposition, they seem to have all kind of issues and fault with our constitution, and the minute that they get into government, that those issues and those faults are no longer relevant. And I think that that is where the inconsistency comes in. Webbo, I feel that as a young nation, we were able to even represent, we were able to see our representation even at Olympics. St. Kitts and Nevis in our 41 year of independence have at some point had the fastest human being on the planet. Those are significant accomplishments in our development. Webbo, you touch on what about the rest of us. It is, for me, sometimes I often ask myself the question, really, what is the criteria? Is there a criteria list somewhere out there for someone to be elevated to a national hero? Because in my mind there are quite a number of those that we see around. Our own national hero here on the island of Nevis, the lone national hero on the island of Nevis, Dr. Simeon Daniel, he would have done some remarkable things while he was at the helm. He would have given us the Bank of Nevis, and we know that the Bank of Nevis have helped to transform the lives and the livelihood of every single Nevisian across the spectrum. He would have given us the Sixth Form College, and I believe that that too was one of those fundamental pillars in our development. I believe, Webbo, that his vision for Nevis in terms of our infrastructure, he would have been the chief architect, the person who would have been able to attract the Four Seasons to the island of Nevis. And just those three examples alone, Webbo, Sixth Form, Bank of Nevis, Four Seasons, we all would have seen how those would have helped to transform the lives and the livelihood of Nevis. And I think that knowing him and knowing what he really wanted to accomplish for Nevis, the true independence, as we would say, the secession of Nevis, he was not able to accomplish that. But with that aside, Webbo, I believe that his accomplishment certainly warrants his elevation to a national hero status. He did not do it alone, of course. His family would have had to make some tremendous sacrifices. There were other men and women who would have worked with him, who would have rallied with him, who would have supported him. And I believe too that they are as worthy as some of those accolades. Webbo, I think going forward, St. Kitts and Nevis have, in my mind, one of the very unique motto, country above self. And I believe that it's a motto that and I mentioned it today at the Charleston Primary School Independence Program, that we must never ever forget our motto. Our motto is extremely important to all of us, country above self. And I think that when we look at what we are doing in our country, when we look at what we are doing to our country, we must always try to remember that every single act that we do can either have a positive or a negative impact on the island of Nevis. So about 41 years on, we have come some ways. We have made some stumbles. We have had, in my mind, some successes and some failures. But I think as a people, as a nation, as in my mind, the smallest country in the Western Hemisphere, I think that we still have quite a lot to be proud of in our 41st celebration of independence, Webbo.
Just a little input there on some of what Mr. Brand said. I do believe there's some major imbalances that affects us still, that's within our governance document, our constitution. Our 41 years going out, there's still vexing issues from the Nevis perspective. One of the vexing issues, I think, the crux of the vexing issue stems from the fact that you should never have a federal government, sitting federal government, in my opinion, without representation in cabinet that sits at the table at all times in a federal cabinet.
From Nevis?
Yes, you should always have that in my mind. If there's if you want to show parity or some sort of equity, that would always be a vexing issue in the Kra and Nivisions. Representation, and that they must have leverage. That representation must have a degree of leverage where in cabinet. So however they fix the constitution, where they give saying it's its own government and all this sort of thing, is fine. But the ultimate thing is, as it relates to the executive part of our government, you must have a Nivisions, not a Nivision. And it must show a level of, and within the legislature, of course, you must have Nivisions at the table in the governing part of it. You would have oppositions, of course, but that has to be as a part of the new the new document that they come up with. In my mind, I think that is part of the underpinning of a lot of the problems we may have from a governance standpoint, as it relates to, let's say, revenue sharing, as it relates to a number of things. All of these can be tackled from that standpoint. And going to the point of heroes, again, is a blind spot as far as I'm concerned, because you ask the average person in Nevis, you have 5 national heroes. Brand touched on Sim Daniel. I mean, there's great justification for him as a national hero, and we're not going to relitigate this on the show. But, of course, Bratcher, a lot of us know what Bratcher did. I don't know if the children do. I don't know in Nevis if all the kids know what Sim Daniel did, and as really up on the history, and if it's taught in like civics when we went to school at some point. A lot of us would know Simmons, of course, who ushered the country into independence. It would be merited, in my opinion, and most folks' opinions, as a national hero. These are things that are transformational, what Sim Daniel Bratcher did. But the question would be asked, okay, explain to me Southwell, merit. Explain to me France, merit to national status. Many persons don't know they're just a national hero. And I think that's a blind spot in the education of our people. That needs to be fixed. And somebody needs to tell the people, and let the people know, because at least people would have an idea what it is we're looking for in terms of national heroes, acceding somebody to the status of national hero. Again, the issue where I say we're floating, we're literally like we're in comatose or floating in this place, because it's, like I mentioned, what's happening on Main Street. That is your main thoroughfare. After 6 p.m., 7 p.m., walk along Charlestown Main Street, see what's happening, and what's happening is not pretty. It's not, to me, is not encourageable. And I do believe we need to. I frankly, I'm not at ease within myself as to what Nevis would look like 5-10 years from now, and what Main Street would look like if this is the direction we're heading.
Glenn, I know it was sometime last year when I visited a number of primary schools, and I know that they were teaching the subject of government politics. I visited the Joycelyn Liebert Primary, the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary. I remember visiting the St. Thomas's Primary, and the topic that they were teaching really was some of what you were just talking about, the history of and who these individuals were, and I think that the topic was also the structure of our government, and we are talking about in grade 5, grade 6 level. So there is some I am aware that there is the attempt to impart this kind of knowledge to our children at that age. You raised the issue as to, and you called, I think, 2 names, Southwell and France, and I will not, as you are not minded to do, to litigate this on here. But I think that over time and during the period that we came out of in the 60s and 70s, in my mind, those, I am a child of the 70s, and those were, from what I have learned and what I've been told, those are some very dark days in St. Kitts and Nevis, literally and figuratively, some very dark days. And these gentlemen would have sought to push the 2 islands of St. Kitts and Nevis, and of course, you know, we had Anguilla, who decided to go in a different direction, and they were able to get us to a point where in 1980, I think it was, when the PAM NRP took the reins of government from the Labour and moved us into independence in 1983. I thought that the foundation was laid. I thought that the movement was already in train, so to speak, that it was only the natural course that the new government would have moved the country into independence. Whether they did it in the same way or different, I know that there were different views and different perspectives as to how they go about it, but I feel that they would have laid the foundation for our independence. 41 years on, like I said, we have seen some significant changes, and our people, in my mind, are now exposed to quite a number of opportunities, not only here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, but wider afield. And I think that while we try to, as you highlighted, some of the anomaly in our constitution, to create a constitution, so to speak, or to amend our constitution in such a way that an elected member on the island of Nevis will always be at the seat of the federal level. I think you and I are in agreement with that. There is no qualms. You are not going to get any qualms from me with that. I feel that sometimes decisions are made, policies are put forward, and the people of Nevis does not always have the kind of buy-in or input that we ought to have. So I totally agree with you on that. I could remember very clearly in the late Vance Winkworth Amry's time, a piece of legislation was going through the House, and I think he had something to do with offshore banking or financial services or something, and the government of Nevis was totally against it, and it triggered. And I think those are the kind of conversations that can be avoided once we have that buying and being around the table. That was just one example, and I think from that instant, I believe that Nevis would have been.
Well, another one I would input was the CSEME signing onto the Caribbean Economic Caribbean Single Market, whatever it is.
Caribbean Single Market and Economy.
Correct. Yes. That signing, I think the Labour government was in power at that point with Douglas as Prime Minister. They had a full government of Labour only. Nevis, from what I remember, was not consulted on it. Vance Amry again was the premier then. The signing of that was a vexing issue from his standpoint. He would have, that has created some consternation here. We have, there are people who have concerns about the immigration, lack of an immigration policy or being overrun. It was good for the bigger countries then to sign on to that, like Jamaica and the rest. Jamaica's Guyana and not Guyana, is Guyana in it? But the bigger countries, that is, because of course, if we travel back and forth, you can work in each other jurisdiction. Of course, skills certificate was a part of that whole mix in terms of what came out of that. But there is a sense that it was done as a job program for the bigger countries to let who could not offer opportunities to the citizens. At least they can go further afield and find opportunities in the region. Of course, that would create some displacement. The idea behind that, from a small island standpoint, they could create some displacement. Antigua, for example, Gaston Brown, a few years ago, decided to opt out of CSE-ME, the portion that spoke towards, I think, hotel workers. They're not admitting hotel workers, because they want to use their own people in the hotel industry exclusively, for the most part. That, you see, here you go, a piece of document to sign that has major implication on the Nevis end of it, and with our little population, and no consultation. You have no one at the table. You have, from Nevis to represent, that have the leverage, in the federal government. These things to me portends a major problem, in the structure, in the unity of the federation, trying to find that perfect unity we are trying to find, union between St. Kitts and Nevis. And I think as we march towards trying to find that perfect union, it takes goodwill. It takes men of goodwill to come to the table on both sides of the Narrows to do this. And I think that is the direction which we are to be beginning to look at in terms of perfecting the union of St. Kitts and Nevis, I think.
Well, you are absolutely correct. I think that for us to really see any serious amendment to our constitution, it is going to take goodwill. It will take men and women who are minded to bring a constitution that is more representative of the situation that is now taking place within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Of course, as always, the vexing issue for Nevis continues to be the revenue sharing issue. That, I believe, would have to be something that would need some serious consultation on, some hammering out on. I know that it is something that the Premier would have spoken about on numerous occasions, that while we continue to receive a certain portion of the CBI proceeds, the Nevis position is that we are not necessarily asking or looking for any revenue that is generated by any business on St. Kitts
or taxpayers,
right, and vice versa. I feel that the burning issue continues to be that entity that said St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship, and the disadvantaged position that we have been placed at over these many years. But all of these are things, Glenn, that I think men and women of goodwill who genuinely want to see better relations between St. Kitts and Nevis, who genuinely want to see both islands develop to the extent where we are so interdependent on each other that if there is genuine development in the Federation, that all can benefit. I must say to you, Glenn, that I am looking at the geothermal project, I know that there has been quite a number of statements coming across from the federal level on this very all-important resource here on the island of Nevis. And I think that as a people, for us to really see the full potential and the full benefit of it, I think that we will have to have some goodwill in that particular discussion as well.
I totally agree on that. What I see, and I don't know if you would engage me on that on Webbo, of course, but I see the business community has been doing the lead in terms of unifying the country, and the young people. And the business community in particular is the driver of this, and young people, and from entertainment, both across the hours back and forth. You can see the coming together of people, the willingness to come together. I mean, the differences are not as sharp. You don't see that at all. It's seamless. You don't know the difference between the people anymore, between Kittitians and Nivians. They come over in droves and party from all week. On the weekends they're here, vice versa. I think the boat business has helped for this. And last, but I think the people in the business community is leading the politicians. I mean, in terms of this, they are leading, and I think the politicians and the policy people, then we have to take a cue from them in terms of perfecting the union.
Glenn, I don't think that we have ever really had a major issue, so to speak, with business, with sports, with entertainment, with the social interaction of our people. I believe that over the years, that component of the relationship between St. Kitts and Nevis has always been out front. We have had, of course, our little squabbles here and there when it comes on cricket and football and so on and so forth, but the interaction when it comes to sports, that has always been something, in my mind, really good between St. Kitts and Nevis. In terms of the business, we have some major corporations with offices both in St. Kitts and on Nevis, and it meant that because of the kind of profitability, so to speak, they may have been located in St. Kitts and they recognize that there is also a market on Nevis, so they would have expanded. In terms of our social interaction, Culturama, Carnival, Music Festival, CPL, you name it, there has always been that movement. And it is even 10 times easier now. When I went to CFBC in St. Kitts, you had to catch the 7 o'clock boat and the 4 o'clock boat. Otherwise, you either had to sleep or swim in St. Kitts. But now, you can go to St. Kitts 7 o'clock and by 7:30 you're back in Nevis. That is the advancement in the development that we continue to see and the interaction that we continue to see amongst our people.
What you see more, as opposed to when you and I was coming up, not only just coming up, but years ago, you're witnessing more Kittitians in Nevis on a daily basis and a week by week basis, just to hang. This is an escape. It has become. Hear me out. It has become, and what I'm merely saying. Yes, it's easier to travel. But the differences between the folks, to me, the differences the artificial differences that was thrown up, and of course a lot of this was engineered by politicians, right? That to me has diminished a lot. And it's encouraging. I like that. And I think most people in the Federation, as we seek for this perfect union, this seamless union, I think the thing that's standing outside the room and that has not allowed itself to come in the room is the political piece of it, the governance piece of it. And that needs to be rectified.
And that takes genuine goodwill.
Correct.
You said that you see a lot of Kittitians on Nevis on the weekend. I know that we went through a very devastating period in 2020, 2022, the COVID period.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the the movement, so to speak, of more petitions, as you rightly put it, was due to COVID. I know that there is one lady in particular, who a lady who I've done some business with on Sinkits. Ever so often she would jump on a plane and go to Miami or New York. That lady probably spend more time in Nevis now, on weekends, on holidays. I am not even sure if she's been to New York in the last year and a half. She would have come during the COVID period. I believe that it was no less a person than the Premier who would have made a clarion call to our brothers and sisters on St. Kitts to come and see the other side of the Federation during COVID. They did.
Correct.
And many of them would have come and they would have embraced and understand why we always say Nevis nice. All of that again, Glenn, is as a result of the opportunities and the call, so to speak, to come and see what we have to offer, and vice versa, because I know on weekends a lot of Nevisians go over on St. Kitts. They go and have their fun and lime and so on and so forth. So that social interaction is alive and well. You are absolutely correct. I believe that the fourth pillar, so to speak, or the fifth pillar, the political genuine approach has not necessarily rise to the level that I feel it can be, and I think that may have been one of the main reasons why we continue to have from time to time these sporadic flare-ups, so to speak. We have had a unity government in St. Kitts and Nevis. You made the argument that you wanted to see Nevisians around the table. We were able to, St. Kitts and Nevis were able to put a unity government, federal government in place. And we all know what happened. It collapsed because there was not that genuineness towards Nevis. And I feel that while we continue to make this request to have that genuine interaction and that genuine relationship with the island of Nevis, it's not a one-way street.
Correct.
It's not a one-way street. This is not a one-way road. You need to be able to give to get.
You know, I mean, nobody gives. I think one of the problems that why politicians probably drag their feet is because nobody really ever gives up power. It's just the way man is designed, and it would require some to give up power, or at least relinquish the level of power that they have from the federal government structure standpoint. So restructuring calls for this sort of thing. You know, that level of power, that level of, I don't want to use the authority, but that level, spending authority, all that sort of thing that comes with that power, that leverage they have. And that's why I keep using the term, men of goodwill. And they would have, I think, like I said, the business of community is out front, the young people are out front, the social mix is out front, leading the charge. I think they're dragging their feet. And of course, we always hear, politicians have a way of dividing people. That's how they win in politics a lot of times, sorry. But it's just the way, numbers, politics is numbers, a numbers game, and it's counting heads, and who is better at counting heads, that's what it's all about. But get beyond that, when you look at the larger, the greater good of the country, and the future for those behind us, and you really have, all of us who have a stake in it, you have to be a grander person. You have to be bigger than you, and the small, short-lived wins. The small short win battles that you win. There's a larger war to win, and the success of of St. Kitts Nevis. And I think geothermal you throw in could be a game changer in many ways if dealt with right. It's a great resource. it would transform our economy into more of a green economy. It would be, if that's possible. It would help in terms of quality of life. It would attract. It has the possibilities of attracting a different type of industry mix other than a tourist-based industry. You can, delving into areas of like computers, data servicing and all that sort of thing, because of the stability of the power. You attract big players in this game, in the technology game. You can attract them. There are lots of possibilities. You can get into minerals, in terms of minerals production, because you're going way down into the Earth's core, and you're bringing up a lot of stuff, based on how it's done in Iceland and places like that. That, and it can create many bifurcations in terms of ancillary industries, just other than production of power, cheap power. So it gives us a chance. It gives us a chance to shift the economy. It gives us a chance. It's in Nevis, of course. The resources are here on Nevis, and it gives buy-in, even more buy-in in terms of forming this perfect union. And I think it creates some hope that from that standpoint.
Well, Webbo, Glenn, as you talk about the greater good of the country, I believe that all right-thinking people would want to see these two islands develop in such a way that the entire population benefits. When we think about the greater good of the country, we need to be able to, in a very real and sustainable way, for the greater good of the country, we have to be able to get crime and criminality under control. Otherwise, we would lose our country. You spoke about the geothermal. Of course, that would be a significant boost for the greater good of our country. I'm using your word, greater good of the country. I see the endless potential in it. I see where once we are able to reduce the cost of energy, we would be able to attract certain type of manufacturing. I expect that we would see a number of businesses minded to expand their present plant. I am seeing that there would also be different spin-off from the geothermal development. All of that in the greater good of the country. It has the potential to be able to allow St. Kitts and Nevis to become an exporter of energy. St. Martin, I was in St. Martin a couple of weeks ago, and electricity is going off 4 and 6 hours a day and into the night. I mean, I believe that if we had that situation in Nevis, there would have been protests morning, noon and night in the island of Nevis. Where I stayed in St. Martin for those few days, the business had a generator, and he literally had to be buying diesel to make sure that his business and his customers was. And it's an ongoing, when you look at all of those opportunities, I think that this development would allow us to be an exporter. Glenn, I think that we have some, what I call some golden eggs in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I think that if we are truly genuine with each other across the Narrows, we can turn those golden eggs, so to speak, into meaningful returns for the benefit of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis.
You just mentioned something. Just imagine if the geothermal were to be able to come on board. It's our fuel bill in Nevis alone is in somewhere north of $50 million now per year. In St. Kitts is over maybe 100 and something million, at least 100 million. But Nevis was 48 million a couple of years ago, probably north of that. That's money you hold back now. It can be done, can be channeled to different areas. Whether it's social service, wherever you want to spend that money. We have a chance. It allows us to cheaper electric bills. Our electric bills would drop significantly from what we experience today. So again, here's more disposable income for ordinary people. And the government, of course, not having to spend that kind of money in purchasing fuel. To me, again, like I said, the politicians have to look at themselves, and they have to begin to look at the overarching issues of the country and see where the drag is in terms of so-called creating this perfect union, unity of St. Kitts Nevis, and move away or they're the one, in my mind, who are creating the stumbling block, who are the blockage towards what we're trying to achieve. Because they're the one who can change the Constitution. They're the one who can advocate the Constitution, as Webbo said. I remember there was a green paper by Limo. This might have been about 1978, thereabout. It wasn't followed up on. I understand when Douglas was campaigning prior to he getting in office, is 93, 94. He was high on this. I think Webbo interviewed him back then, 94, 95. He forgot about everything he campaigned on. Again, is a power grab. So politicians now, we have the people that I said it earlier, that we are floating. We have to begin to hold these politicians accountable. We have to begin to hold their feet to the fire as a people, because they work for us. The politicians ask us to give them a job. They're in a thing called public service to serve the public. They are servants, public servants. And if they are public servants, then we ought to be holding them to account, because and demand better for the country. And that's just where I stand on the matter.
So you, Glendale, in your view, and having been living in the diaspora and seeing developed countries and stuff like that, you find for the 41 years of independence of our nation, we're doing exceedingly well?
We've done exceedingly well from an economic standpoint. We're ranked number 2 in the entire region based on statistics and economic statistics in terms of GDP, in terms of our quality of life issues. We're right next to the Bahamas. We're left ahead of most of the Caribbean countries, including Trinidad, in terms of GDP, earnings per year. Our unemployment rate is rather low compared to most Caribbean countries, so we've done exceedingly well in 41 years. The X factor, or the elephant in the room that has not been addressed, is governance. We've been together since 1881, 82, thereabout, some 100 and something years, 100, maybe 40, 100, whatever years it is, 140 years, and there's always been that vexing issue. The inequities, between St. Kitts and Nevis and Nevisians has always been agitating about it. The secession cry has always been in the background. It came to the front in the late 60s and the early 70s when the NRP was created in 1971 after the Christina disaster, 71 thereabout, and it was the clarion call of the NRP that vaulted them into power and leadership. My point again is that vexing issue for 140 plus years ought to be diminished, not just diminished, but extinguished from our midst.
So are you suggesting that it be removed from the Constitution?
What be removed from the Constitution?
Clause 113.
I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm
Oh,
not suggesting. I haven't even touched the topic.
Okay.
I'm one of the biggest thing. To me, I think Nevisian actors are to be at every federal government that's formed at the table with leverage. It has to be, because there's representation in any country that I know of that has different territories that come together to form a country. Particularly first world countries, you do have representation from all the territories. So
you advocating what then? That you change up the arrangement as far as the Constitution is concerned and make it mandatory that when you do a poll, you must end up with a particular percentile from each.
Correct. That would be mostly where my head is at,
Okay.
as it relates to that.
Okay. So it is fair to conclude, based on what you're saying, that the country is doing well. The only problem is you must change the Constitution, and specifically that part of it.
The governance part of the country. The policy and the entire government, governance part of it.
No, I don't get it. When you say the governance part of it,
You're talking about the makeup of the government.
Well, I mean, governance means basically how you execute, the government, meaning the
but you're doing
functions of
well,
government.
But you're doing well,
Yeah,
exceedingly well,
exceedingly well.
on par with the high developed, the first world countries, right? What do you want to change it for?
Why you want to change it?
Yes.
You want to change it because there's when you sit in a federal government, you make all laws in the federal government, you decide spending in the federal government and where monies are spent. That is a problem because federal.
And when you do that, everybody is doing well, according to you, correct?
Again, Rebel, the country is doing well.
Walk with me. The country is doing well based on the policies, the arrangements, and all that. But you wanted change, correct?
The country is not doing well based on policies and the arrangement. The country is doing well in terms of its GDP, in terms of business function.
Let me ask you this.
But business function.
Walk with me. What caused the GDP to be that good?
I think the GDP is that good because of the CBI.
Okay, walk with me. Who put that policy in place? What if I get in next time around and I decide for whatever reason we're going to abolish that CBI thing because we got too many people who are not from here, who don't live here. Suppose they come and live here, then they will outnumber us. And suppose we change that, think we'll have the same GDP?
I don't know. Because you may replace it. You may replace it with something different. I don't know what you would do at that point.
Listen what I asked you. I didn't ask you if you know, because I know you don't know. I asked you what you think, and don't tell me you don't think. You think we will have the same GDP if we change and finish away with the CBI?
We would have a different GDP.
We will have a different GDP, and it's quite possible then we wouldn't be so well off because the GDP brings in some great money.
It's quite possible we would not be so well off, and it's quite possible we probably do. I don't know what to replace it with when they change it.
Okay. What if we replace it with what we had before we had the CBI?
We'll have a problem.
Okay. So
a major problem.
Right. So you have a situation where you had a major problem then. You put a policy in place based under the heading of governance, and you're doing well. And you're arguing you need to change it?
No. What I'm arguing is, let me go slow. What I'm arguing is, when you make policy in this country, regardless if it's doing well, yes or no, there has to be a negligence at the table, in cabinet, at all governments in the federal government. I don't care if you have an election next year or a year after, negligence has to be at the table. That's all I'm saying to you, because it's representative government. As it is right now, you can have a government form and no one from Nevis, because you win 6 seats in St. Kitts, nobody from Nevis is represented at the table. That to me is not a good look. Regardless of the policy that comes out of that 6-member in St. Kitts or 7-member in St. Kitts, who sits in cabinet, is a good policy and you make a lot of money. It's still, there's a question of equity from a governance standpoint, and that needs to be addressed.
Okay, so you're arguing that you would rather have a failing system which is made up of good representation from each side than to have a successful system that doesn't have equal numbers in terms of representation from each side.
I'm not arguing that at all.
Equal or proportional?
Proportion, yes.
I am not arguing that at all.
What are you? Okay. You just want to know that you have a certain proportional representation. It doesn't matter the outcome.
Correct.
Okay, and so you would rather have a failure with proper proportional representation than success with not the adequate proportional representation.
I'd rather have failure with adequate representation, proportional, and I'd rather have failures with proportional representation. Thank you. Both sides, success or failure, but I know I had skin in the game and I was at the table.
So Glenn,
I got you.
Your wish is then, therefore, is to ensure that all times, no matter what, that the Constitution is structured in such a way that whenever there is a federal government enacted, that there must be representation from the Navy's end of it.
Mr. Brand, just let me get this. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening, Webbo.
Yes.
Observation. I noticed that for the past 40 years, we have a constitution that has brought us to where we are. And it has brought us to where we are with divisions complaining, petitions gloating. We get to a point where we have some politicians in place, and with a certain amount of diplomacy and goodwill, one side or the other, are managing to quell the divisiveness between St. Kitts and Nevis. And some people have a problem with that. All of a sudden they call in constitutional crisis. They're calling all sorts of the constitution need rebuilding and it needs changing. And we have some people here in Nevis gullible enough to buy that nonsense. I'm peddling it as well.
You ever heard about the drug ecstasy?
You know, I wonder when are we gonna come together as division.
Ecstasy.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
You were asking a question. Webbo, I was asking Glenn if the position that he's really taking is that that at all times that there must be division representation at the federal level within the cabinet structure. I think that is the point that you are trying to hone in on.
Yeah,
it would therefore mean, Glenn, that you are correct. Then, if that is the position, then there would have to be some reworking of the Constitution and built in a proportional representation mechanism within the Constitution itself.
well, you know, listen, if we're going to be in democracy, in our politics is representative politics. Remember the word representative politics. You're representing people. And it seems to me you cannot be in a position where you're doing allocations in the executive. You're levying taxes. you're doing allocations of those revenues, how you allocate them, decide to allocate them. And of course, people are what they are. You have constituencies, let's say your constituency here, I'm just using an example, Sandy Point, whatever it is.
Well,
No, hear me out. Let me finish. All right? The point is, people are going to allocate to where they want to allocate. Mind you, we started off saying there's been a vexing issue here, right, on Nevis, as it relates to representation politics at the federal level. I think that's the crux of the problem for the most part for the decades and decades. We've had that rose to the point where we wanted secession. Yes, we came out of statehood in 67, right? And we went into statehood in 67. And then from there we went to independence by 83. But has always been an issue as it relates to centralized power in Bastia, and somehow marginalizing or balkanizing Nevis out of the mix. Now, that has persisted for decades and decades and decades. And still we went into 1983 with a government. And 41 years after, we have not addressed some of the vexing issues, because from time to time in the last 41 years, we've heard the word secession come up from political actors here in Nevis. That is undeniable. No, you cannot be unified as a country and and talking about breaking away. It disrupts the planning part of government, the future of the country, and this has to be settled from a governance standpoint. That's
settled
what I'm saying.
Meaning what? Nobody is supposed to talk about it?
No.
But I don't understand.
No.
Meaning what?
Every time the word secession comes up, from a Nevis standpoint, the other side in St. Kitts is agitated about it. Meaning the politicians in St. Kitts would say, well, let them go then. Or let them go, or whatever the case is. You hear that. I've heard all this talk. My point is simple. All right? We are family, for the most part.
So family don't break up and
families do break up.
On their own and stuff like that?
Of course. But we began speaking about where we are and trying to form this perfect union. And the only way to achieve it, I think the only stumbling block is where we are politically, from a federal standpoint.
And to solve the problem, nobody must talk about secession, or nobody must talk about Nevis should have its own government, independence and stuff like that. How are you going to get that done and use the system of government called democracy? How are you going to get that done? Or you just...
Webbo,
yes.
If you... Listen. Spencer, you're the politician, not me. What has been in your mind? The issue that always have the word secession come out from the politicians or the public here in Nevis. What has been the problem?
Well, Glenn, 99.99999% of the time has to do with revenue. It all comes down to the bottom line, and that has been from day one the major issue.
So how do you resolve the allocation issue?
But let me ask you a question. I'll come to that, but let me ask you a question. I think that we find ourselves in a very unique setup, in that we have the federal government that you are saying that there should always be Nevision representation on it. And we also have a situation where the island of Nevis has a Nevis government, a Nevis Island administration that administers the affairs of the island of Nevis, with the exception, of course, of foreign affairs and security, the education policy and the health policy all intertwined with each other. I am wondering, Glenn, if it is that the suggestion of St. Kitts having its own island government, Nevis having its own island government, and then you put a federal structure together to administer some of those same policies, foreign affairs, security, and those kind of things. Because security in St. Kitts and Nevis is we are almost an open border kind of a situation. Wouldn't it be, and this is a question, wouldn't it be a much more better approach if the federal government, so to speak, structure were to probably be removed from the equation, and St. Kitts has its own government, Nevis has its own government, and then we have a federal structure that deals with some of these things? Because I am saying, Glenn, that the federal government, at times I feel that one country is at a disadvantage over the other, because Nevis has its own Nevis Island government, and the federal government is a government, so to speak, for both St. Kitts and Nevis, and sometimes there are conflicts and overlaps and so on. And I think that if we were to resolve that particular issue of creating two independent governments, and then you have, quote unquote, a treaty of friendship, a treaty of cooperation, whatever you want to call it, to create that unified structure.
I mean, that idea is a great idea, and it should be in the mix of discussion, for discussion rather, because there's no reason why Nevis should have an NIA and St. Kitts don't have a SIA. Same thing, right? I totally agree with that. How we structure the federal government, because
let me just take this, gentleman. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Hi, good evening, Webbo. How are you doing?
All right.
So we just want to make an observation.
Yes, go ahead.
Just trying to make an observation. I'm wondering, I'm sitting here listening to you guys, and I'm wondering, how much longer are we going to debate this issue? It's like we're going around in circles. We're going around and around in a merry-go-round. The issue is clear now. The issue is very clear. What Glenn is advocating there, the only way that kind of system that he's talking about could work is if you have a system like in America, where you have all the states have equal representation as far as the Senate is concerned. We have equal representation. In other words, I think it's going to have 8 seats, Nevis is going to have 8. That's the only way that could materialize. Now, having said that, we have a present constitution here, which they designed in '83. From the Nevis perspective, as far as the former premier was pushing to get Nevis developed, and then we move away from St. Kitts. It so happened that that didn't materialize to his liking or whatever, to most of us, from what we see. And he left us just high and dry here. We're going back and forth. The Constitution already have a mechanism in it so Nevis, the people of Nevis could decide what they want to do. All we have to do is get a good promotion going, whether it is the media, just like in America. We need the media in Nevis. We need a station in Nevis, basically, that could advocate and push that agenda and try to pull the politicians and the people along so we could get to that sweet spot. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be going back and forth, and here we are, Nevis end up struggling. The NIA can't survive like that, because when the NIA, they got a CBI down, they're full of money. When the NIA got to go to the bank, back and forth, overdraft there, overdraft here, trying just to keep the head above water. The government is thinking just got to go to the SIDF and take what they want and manage their affairs easily. So Nevis got a barrage of debt there now that they're strangling Nevis, and they don't even think it's living high off the house. I mean, this is crazy. What this situation is going to push the Nevisian politicians to do, the NIA in particular, is to tighten the belt if they want to come out from that. Because the politicians think, let's face it, they're not going to give an inch. They're going to hold you strangling like that all the time. I don't understand how we're going to get out of it.
But caller, I could ask you a question.
Of course.
Did you hear Glendale say, and did you agree with him that at this juncture the both islands are doing well economically.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, economically, and thus there is not going to support perhaps the fact or the argument that you just made.
No. What the argument I made? What I'm saying.
No. When you said that St. Kitts uses the CBI monies, Nevis borrows it and swimming in debt. Then Glendale seemed to, based on his evaluation, did not suggest that. He had a contrary view because he said both islands are doing well, almost as good as the first world countries. Am I correct, Glendale?
But you see, Glenn is saying that, making that point. I understand exactly what he's saying. Overall, it's fine. But when you look at the details in there, Nevis is struggling.
Right.
But the overall thing is, economy is fine. But Nevis, the inequities still exist. That is what Glendale is saying, and he's correct. He's correct.
Let me just do a little fact check. Glendale, that's what you were saying?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
I understand him 100%. I'm listening to him right here.
Okay.
And he's spot on. But at the same time, we got to be realistic about this whole thing here, because constitutional reform is an oxymoron right now. There is no way you could get that going unless you get a two-thirds majority in St. Kitts and a two-thirds majority in Nevis. I heard Tim Daniel say that directly right to my face. So look, the Constitution was not designed for that. It's designed to get, at least from the Nevis end, to get Nevis going. And if we don't get that, well, if we just keep going just like how it is. The way the Constitution is right now is very, very, very complex, and it's difficult to change. It's almost impossible to change. It's very, very extremely difficult. So when you hear politicians talking about constitutional reform, it's rubbish. Because look at the history. Douglas them was all there for 15 years, 20 years. He had 8 seats in St. Kitts at one time. It didn't even bother with that, because as far as he can, it can't happen. It cannot happen. The easiest way out, as Tim Daniel said, the easiest way out is for Nevis to push that clause 113 and head on our merry way. Otherwise, we're going to be struggling with this issue.
Let me ask you this. How easy is that at this point in time, you think?
I mean, it's more difficult now, but it's going to always keep bubbling up. But I think what could take it over the threshold is a media outlet in Nevis to drum the issue every day. Just like how we have freedom in St. Kitts, that's a labor station. We need a station in Nevis to push the politicians them in that direction, because the politicians them don't want to go there on their own. So if you got a media outlet in Nevis who could bang that issue, just like the media in America. The media, for the most part, drive a lot of the issues in America. The media, whether you believe it or not, whether it's Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, they have a big part to play on public opinion. And the politicians sometimes got to run to them to basically make the point on this, because the media is going to keep that whole thing going.
Okay.
But nothing is wrong with what you are doing, talking about the issue. No problem. The issue got to be, ventilated all the time.
Right.
But at the same time, if there's no mystery why you have St. Kitts running away with everything and Nevis just chuckling along, it's no mystery, because the political power and the weight is always in St. Kitts. The only thing probably could happen right now here, man, is if they got an election today and you come up with a tie in St. Kitts and the tiebreaker come from Nevis, and the premier in Nevis or whoever it is in Nevis who will break the tie. When they become if they want to become prime minister, they're going to become prime minister and get a hand from that CBI money and move what he needs to move to Nevis and let him take him to court. And then the issue would probably be settled once and for all there. Go in there and take out what he needs, and move it to Nevis Treasury and see what the issues are then, and then if they're vexed and thinking, let them carry us to court, and then let the court decide.
Okay. All right.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Easy.
Okay. Glendale.
Yeah, the gentleman is spot on for the most part in my mind. I think these are the problems that we have and we persist, and they will continue to persist under the surface, if unless that political structure part of it is dealt with. Allocations are important. Who is in charge of allocating is the man. That's the boss. And that determines how things are done. And that determines how you eat. And I'm not meaning literally in the sense in here in Nevis, but that is determining what you have access to. And anybody who has that level of authority, when you have representation here, you're representing thousands and thousands of people, but you don't have a seat at the table. It's just not a good look. It's not a good feel. It's just incongruent. So there must be, if we are a unit and we are St. Kitts Nevis, we're SKN, we're pushing, and we're trying to create better quality of life in this country for every citizen and those who are coming behind. We have to fix that. We have to fix it where that bubble below the surface goes away. And, that's just my position on the matter.
About the caller, I thought that the caller was, in my mind, very much on point with most of what he said. In terms of a radio station or an entity pushing the issue of Nevis going forward through the secession, I think, Webbo, it will have to be something that I feel that both political parties or all political parties on Nevis would have to sit around the table and decide that that's the route they want to go. Because as it is now on the island of Nevis, no political party on Nevis has 90% support, right? And that could very well be an issue, as it has been in the past. Persons will vote along political lines if their party is either in support or if their party is against it, and it will not succeed. We have seen that before. The caller also raised a very interesting mathematical scenario. We had that scenario already, 4-4, and the position that I feel Nevis would have taken as it regards to the neutral stand. Perhaps in hindsight, 2020 vision, the juror, I feel, may have still be out on that particular position. And I feel that if we were to look back at that particular scenario, the caller said that if you have a tie in St. Kitts and the Premier or the Prime Minister comes from Nevis and move everything, I see that as well could be one of the catalysts that I feel could trigger that Section 113. But I think, Webbo, that it is very obvious and very clear that for Nevis to really move ahead, and for the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis to really move ahead together as a single unit, there will have to be some really goodwill on both sides, especially coming from the St. Kitts end. Because the caller is absolutely correct. Nevis continue to struggle. Nevis continue to struggle when it comes to our revenue and access to what I call tax-free resources.
Well, it's not going. Again, this scenario paradigm, they need a paradigm shift, and the paradigm we've been operating under for the last 41 years, and I'll go plus that to statehood. whatever number of years that was, and on, remains the same. From a governance standpoint, from a tax policy standpoint, and an allocation standpoint, that to me is not sustainable. It is not sustainable for the greater beyond, because the rumblers would continue. It would affect the unit. It would impede on our forward progress. And I do believe that it's sort of like a stranglehold on the country, though the country is doing well, and in terms economically and all that. The CBI has been a golden bullet. What do they call it? A silver bullet. The CBI in terms of gaining revenues in the country, non-tax revenues. But now that we're seeing what's happening internationally from the EU, and what's happening from the United States, and the pressures that's being put on CBI in terms of the due diligence demands and all that sort of thing, and with the restrictions that's been placed on, it has slowed the growth, from what I'm hearing, of the CBI in terms of sales. And if you have less sales, you have less revenues being collected, less money is being collected in your treasury, and that begin to manifest itself in the slowing down in the overall economy. We can't get certain things done, and we can't begin to do things that we normally would. We need to unleash the country, and we cannot have the country being sort of handicapped by a political structure. I think there are times in our history when Nevis has done well. In the early 90s, thereabout, with the Four Seasons, it was doing rather well, and the offshore sector did well. Our tourism industry was way ahead, in terms of revenue, than what was happening in St. Kitts. And they created a vexing issue again, because of course the NIA part of it, wanted, there's a vexing issue from the St. Kitts standpoint and the Navy standpoint. And then some politicians who may want to hold grudges and go, they get a windfall in another area, whether it's CBI or what have you, and cut you off and say, when you had yours, you don't want to share it with me, the level of pettiness. I do believe we need to begin to look to get beyond that, and affecting the political composition at a federal level from a constitutional standpoint would begin to attempt to resolve those ongoing issues, these underbelly issues that we've been having. And I think they need to be addressed. We can't continue to swoon along, and float as if we don't have issues and don't deal with them, and don't force our political actors to deal with them for the greater good of the country.
So you're adding that on now to the point that the view you were making earlier?
Well, that's part of the point. It probably came out now more. Okay. In terms of as I flush out more. You flush the idea. The flush, flush out more the idea, but more comes out as we go along. Okay. But it's it's all adding towards what we're trying to achieve. Right.
I hear Glendale, and I believe that it's a discussion that we must continue to have. I agree with him in some parts that St. Kitts and Nevis certainly done well in quite a number of areas. There are some areas that we really need to see some improvement on. One of the big areas, of course, is the issue of crime and crime fighting, criminality and so on. This week, the Federation celebrates our 41st anniversary of our independence. While we reflect on where we have come, we recognize, Webbo, obviously, based on the discussion we are having here tonight, we still have a lot of things that we need to iron out. I believe that while we partake in these celebrations, and I believe that we need to have and continue to have that honest conversation and recognize that while we are doing well, we need to see that greater, genuine effort from both sides. I believe that where we have come, we have a lot to be thankful for. I think that St. Kitts and Nevis is a country that still has tremendous potential. Our people are very creative, our people are very talented, our people certainly have the necessary skill set to be very creative. And I think that while we continue to ensure that we develop our country, the human element and the human factor in this development will feature prominently. Like Glendale, we are at a position, I feel, that we something will have to give. I think that as a country, we have seen certain things over the 41 years that continues to quote unquote dog us, and I think that we need to try and put some of those behind us and move on if we really want to be a true federation. The last caller would have put a number of things on the table, and I hope that the listeners were really listening. I thought his contribution was very poignant and timely, and I think that it adds in my mind a different perspective from what we were talking about, even though it still zero in on the very topic that we were talking about. Glenn, I feel that, and I've always said that St. Kitts and Nevis has a very unique governance structure. I believe that in the creation of our constitution, there really isn't any other constitution anywhere on planet Earth like St. Kitts and Nevis when it comes to one entity has the right to separate versus the other. And I think that while the people of Nevis have always make the argument for that separation because of the type of treatment and the kind of grievances that we have had over the years, the threshold of getting to that level is extremely high. And I think that the framers of the Constitution recognize to break up the union, to break up the country, there must be some clarity in doing so, some clearness in doing so. There must be a significant majority of the people who are willing to go that route. And it has proven time and time and time again that that threshold has not been met. I feel that we can overcome, Glenn, some of these issues and some of these challenges if, in my mind, people are genuine, if, in my mind, people are prepared to show real goodwill on both sides. I think that oftentimes we put governments together, and we have seen a number of them over our 41-year history. I often wonder if it's a real, genuine need to develop St. Kitts and Nevis rather than a matter of convenience. I think that over time we have seen that a lot of those arrangements have dissipated for one reason or the other, and it shows that there is continued to be a lack of genuineness towards each other.
The next political actor in my mind, the next political personality in my mind who may accede to national hero status would have to be somebody who has done something that's really transformative or transformational. And one of those things that it seems to me can be transformative or transformational.
Glenn, I want to stop you, but why does he have to be a politician?
No, I didn't say it. The next politician.
No, you
not the next person. The next politician, I said.
No, but I disagree. Why does he have to be a politician to bring something? We have persons who have done transformative things in our community.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I honestly don't disagree with what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I'm just merely saying, in terms of fixing what we're speaking of, which is government, you take politicians to do this, not a lay person necessarily, people who have the political power and the man, to at least execute these kind of things that we're talking about. The guy who, for example, who would do something great or something that we would consider transformative, of course, in my mind, ought to be, those are the figures who should be transformative. I just don't see the need for all these politicians to be national heroes. But that's just my opinion. All right? My point is we should begin to look beyond the politician, but I'm saying the next politician who accede to that role would have to have done something really transformational in this country. And something that has moved the dial, significantly and affect lives in a positive way in this country. I think one chance would be the person who drives this constitutional reform, and if they can see this perfect union through, or at least begin to see it, that's, I'm not saying he would get it, but I'm saying that's somebody who would be of significance in my mind. Because this has been an issue ongoing for decades on decades, over 100 and something years. And, where the entire country can come together, in terms of a feeling of that sense of union, close to perfect union. There's no perfection in anything, but we seek to find perfect union amongst us.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results. Glendale Herbert, the Honorable Spencer Brand. Yes, Mr. Herbert.
Yeah, the Honorable Spencer Brand. I recognized recently, of course, that Public Works we've been doing some work in St. Kitts on the St. Peter's Road, I think it is. Or Public Works from Nevis, I think, is doing this St. Peter's Road. I think we're doing paving. I mean, you can tell me more, but paving and we have a team down there doing all this thing, which is a good thing. Eh? It's a very good thing, I think.
We had a request, Glenn and Webbo. There was a company on St. Kitts who, I believe, won a bid on St. Kitts to do some work on St. Kitts, and they would have made a request of the Public Works Department here in Nevis to loan a few pieces of our equipment, milling machine, the paver, and our rubber roller. Where we are right now on the island of Nevis, we are not necessarily doing any what I would call major roadworks. We are doing a lot of patching after the recent tropical storm. We have not started any major road construction here on the island of Nevis. So the equipment were available. We decided we had a good, long, hard look at it, and we felt that based on the use of our equipment at this moment, the equipment can be utilized on St. Kitts for a few weeks. I think it's about a month to 6 weeks. They are making very good progress. But like I said, we are not necessarily doing any major road works at the moment. So the equipment were able to be mobilized on St. Kitts. What I would say though as well, we also decided that we were not just going to send our equipment. We wanted to send the necessary personnel who operate those equipment, the operators who are familiar with the equipment, the operators who understand and have the technical expertise in maintaining those equipment. We also send them. It's an arrangement where the contractor will be paying the Nevis Island administration. So it means that it's a kind of revenue generation arrangement for the people of Nevis, and that was made very clear. That was spelled out in the communication. So I look at it as well, Glenn, as the additional opportunity for the gentlemen to ply their trade and ply their skills over on St. Kitts. I feel that they are now at a level where their competence is such that they are very much in high demand. But I go back to what I said earlier. We are not really doing any major road construction at this particular moment. We are in the hurricane season. We have taken a decision that in the month of September and part of October, we will not start any major road construction. You get a shower of rain and all of that goes to naught. I have seen over the years where in these particular months you have significant rainfall and the preparatory work, we have lost a lot of materials, we have lost a lot of time. So when you look at September and October in particular, we just basically doing things like maintenance. The guys are doing some fixing of patching of potholes, some maintenance of some grills and those kind of things and so on and so forth, especially in the month of September and October. So I felt that it was something that we could have done based on what we were doing on Nevis at the time.
Well, it's not the first time we've done this, correct?
No,
we've done it in Oil Road, and I understand.
would have done some work on St. Kitts before, yeah.
And to me, it's a perfect example of coming together and our teams, working together here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Not just, they're exclusively in St. Kitts or we're exclusively in Nevis, etc. When we need support or we need resources, we are, our resources are there, vice versa. And I think that's that's a good thing.
You are correct, Glenn, because we have started to build that relationship over the years. Our water department, we have built that partnership and that relationship. Sometimes we source pieces of hardware from the water department on St. Kitts and vice versa if we have certain things. Recently our bot fusion machine and technician would have gone to St. Kitts to assist them with laying a portion of their pipe for the desal plant on St. Kitts. We are doing ours here as well. We are using a slightly different piping system. And we would have gotten pumps from them, they would have gotten pumps from us. There are sometimes when, based on the size of pumps, that they don't have it in stock, we have it in stock. We lend them until they get theirs, and same thing with public works. I remember when we were doing the stretch of road from Hosford's come down to Rams, we would have borrowed their sweeper to try and help sweep the door. So we have that relationship and collaboration, especially when it comes to public works and water department. I know that even I am not the minister with responsibility for NEVLEC, but I know that I also have that relationship as well with NEVLEC, where there are times when there are pieces of equipment and hardware and so on are going back and forth. And I know that right now, after the storm there in the Windward Islands, a team from NEVLEC and a team from some guys from St. Kitts would have gone. So they have that working relationship, and that is something that we try to ensure that we can continue to build out. Because we don't know when Nevis is going to be at a point where we're going to need as much assistance as possible. We see that sometimes we get these rainfall and we get these storms, and our water, our electricity, our roads are offline, and sometimes we need to get as much hands on deck as possible to bring them back up. So we have to build that relationship, we have to build that partnership, and the only way in which we can do it is to have those continuous interaction with each other.
Yeah, I applaud it. I mean, I also recognize that from my asking a question or two to one or two persons, that even the electrical grid in St. Kitts is built out different from Nevis. They're not the same. So, in terms of if when St. Kitts goes down or needing help, the Nevian electrical workers cannot necessarily. They don't understand. The grid is different, from what I understand, and it's more built on a British system, and the one in Nevis is more an American system, I'm told. Well, in terms of transformers and all, I don't know how it works.
Well, I think that what Nevis has done over the years is to build a lot more redundancy in the system. Yeah. You can isolate a section of Nevis and still push the electricity in a different direction. So I believe that has taken years to get to that point, to build that redundancy in the system. I think that sometimes once you have a problem, you hear the cotton one feeder is out and the whole side of that country is off. They have now sought to reroute the electricity from a different direction. And if you have an issue in a particular area, you can isolate that area and still get electricity. So we've done that with water as well, where you try to build as much redundancy in the system where you can move water from one side to the next. I think all of that, you are dealing with mechanical systems, and from time to time components of that mechanical system is going to go down, and you have to be able to, as far as possible, be able to provide the service still going in a different direction or from a different direction. So all of that is work in progress. We continue to try and see how best we can build out our system. I know you started on roads, but I thought that when you look at water and electricity, all of them follow a similar methodology.
Yep, and that's an example, Webbo, of how we can work together and the country coming closer and closer together, both St. Kitts and Nevis, and supporting each other. Again, we're in Independence 41. We celebrate on Thursday, the 41st birthday. And we've been basically doing a review of where we are and what are the issues that still persist and needs to be resolved in our.
It used to be, and you can tell me whether you agree and whether it still is that way. And Nevisians don't know whether they should celebrate independence or not.
Yes, but they have always been that from the Nevis end, a kind of hesitation to really celebrate it wholeheartedly. I would say to our people that the country is St. Kitts and Nevis. We both jointly went into independence on the 19th of September 1983. And I think that just as much as they celebrate it on St. Kitts, we should celebrate it here on Nevis as well. I believe that some people have a different quote-unquote pride in place when it comes to the celebration of our independence. I know some persons would have come out of a very painful history, and always at the back of their minds they still have the concept of secession in their hearts, and nothing is wrong with that, but I think that as a people and as a nation, becoming independent in 1983 means that Nevis was able to get an island government, and I think for me that is extremely important. We are able to go in our own parliament and pass certain laws and regulation and legislation and all of that, and I think that is something that I feel that our people should be proud of. That as a people we can agree or disagree based on whatever the policies of the government of the day is, and if it is that the people in Nevis are not in agreement with it, they can either do one of two things. They can say to the government, thanks and bye-bye when the time comes, or they can have their representative go into parliament and agitate change in some. I think that Webbo, the celebration of independence here in Nevis, I think that our people should take ownership of it. I feel that where we have come from in 1983 to 2021 is quite some ways.
I think the advent of 2015 team unity began to make a difference in terms of how people celebrate independence in Nevis. I think the turning point, in my look at it, the turning point began then when the then Prime Minister and the administration decided to start doing independence celebrations here in church here in Nevis, services, thank you, and all this other thing here, and engaging Nevisians more. Before Nevisians generally across the entire plain sat on their hands during independence, the entire independence celebration. I mean, they would not really take, as Webbo indicated. But in 2015, going forward, you begin to see that transition. The effort was made by that team unity government to bring together the country more in terms of celebratory mode during independence, and having a lot of functions, and the entire cabinet would come to Nevis and all that sort of thing. Prior to that, that never happened. And I think if it's the one thing that came out of the team unity administration, I would say celebration in Nevis, that is, recognition of independence.
But then the demise of it told you what?
Hey, you can't carry fire and water in the same hand.
So that's why you only talked about the water.
We haven't touched the fire part yet.
Oh, okay, that's why. Okay, that's why you boldly told me a week or two ago that.
I believe we have a few more minutes. I want to take this opportunity to say good night to Edric W. Stanley, Ted Hobson, and Naya. I think that this was a discussion tonight that all of those gentlemen would have relished participating in, and I hope that they are listening. I hope that Naya is continuing to be well, and I certainly want to say to all three gentlemen a very pleasant good evening, and I hope that they continue to be well and get well.
I would like to also double down on what you just said, Spencer. To both three gentlemen, Ted, get well. I hope you're in a good space and health-wise, and continue to build. So for the same for Edric. You guys have done tremendous work. We all follow you. Naya, I met on Sunday. I spoke to him on Sunday. Had a one-on-one. We spoke for a few minutes. He was with his family. He's on the mend, and coming to Naya, good night. Yes, Webbo. So Spencer, what's next?
Independence 41 on Thursday.
What do we have planned?
What do we have planned?
Yeah, I mean, anything in particular that's happening?
We have the Independence Parade on Thursday at the park, starting at 8 o'clock. I want to invite the whole of Nevis to the E.T. Willard Park. I believe that it's a tradition over the last 41 years for the military parade, police, cadets, and to see our children on parade, our Seventh-day Adventist group. And I often sit and I wonder, because for all of those many years, the Navy Symphonic Band would have provided the necessary accompaniment for that particular parade. I expect that they will do the same as well on Thursday. And I want to say congratulations to all those persons who continue to not only play their part in building our country. I think that while we do know that we have some challenges, Glenn, we have some issues here and there, but I think that on a daily basis we have men and women of goodwill who continue to put their hands up to try and build St. Kitts and Nevis, and I certainly want to encourage them to continue to play their part in developing and building our country. Our teachers, our police, our nurses, our doctors, our contractors, the ordinary folk, the men and women who sweep our streets, our drain, you name it, the people who keep the lights on, the people who keep the water on, the people who here at Van Radio who keep us very much informed, and the folks who our postmen, our mail, you know, all the ordinary folk who continue to make St. Kitts and Nevis move, so to speak. Our taxi drivers, our fishermen, just ordinary folk who continue to help us to build this country. I know sometimes some of our people feel that they are not recognized as much as they should, and we certainly want to say to them tonight how deeply appreciative we are of their contribution to the development of St. Kitts and Nevis. They have an important and a critical role to play in our country and the sustainability of our country. I want to use this opportunity as well to appeal to our young men to move in a different direction and move away from the path of crime and criminality. I want to say to them that they have a role to play in helping to groom our children. They are an important figure in helping to raise the next generation. And I want to say to them that they need to step up. They need to step up and take care of their offsprings. Even if you and the mother is not in any serious relationship, you still have that responsibility to fulfill. And I think that once we are able to do that, then we can look forward to greater and better things from St. Kitts and Nevis.
Webbo, we have a good country. We have a great budding country. We can go beyond, our imagination. I just hope that people can continue to work hard. We're young. There are great opportunities, lots of opportunities. You got to be able to see it and seize the moment.
Following the VON News Minute, join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Join Keith Scarborough on Thursday evening at 8 o'clock for Government at Work, a place where you can spend all of your evenings right here in the Eastern Caribbean's powerhouse. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Talk that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
Views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited.
And you were just listening to a repeat edition of the Let's Talk program, which was first aired last Tuesday, September 17th, 2024. It is now 9 o'clock.
With all the power from the